Hello and welcome to the season 2 finale of Please Don't Eat the Sage. In honor of us coming full circle on my baby witch journey this season, I thought I'd take us back to the very beginning. The morning that I decided that I was ready to call myself a witch. As I've mentioned in some of the interviews and the episodes throughout this season, I had always considered myself magical, and I was interested in a lot of things in regards to witchcraft, but I never quite felt like I could own the title witch. Yes, it is a heavier title in history and in weight of its magical power, but it was also just a feeling of wanting to really fully embody something before I called myself it. I didn't want to claim the title too prematurely. And this was just based on my own intuition. It wasn't like I thought anyone was going to judge or had anyone in my corner telling me that I couldn't be a witch. I just wanted it to be something that felt absolutely authentic, because my main goal in life is nothing if not to be absolutely authentic. So I'd just called myself a magic maker or a fairy soul for years, and I dabbled in practices that many would have considered witchcraft, but I didn't call myself a witch. Then I woke up on the morning of the Scorpio new moon of 2022. And when I say there was a calling, I cannot describe the intensity in which I felt called to learn more about witchcraft in the more traditional sense of the term. It was 3 a.m. because a lot of magical things happen between the hours of 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. So of course it was. And I don't remember exactly what pulled me to YouTube or what I specifically looked up, or if I just had something pop up on my feed. But I had stirred awake and immediately grabbed my phone, wanting to seek more information. And I stumbled upon a video on YouTube from a creator named The Green Witch, Annabelle. And I've now grown to know her channel pretty well. And this particular video that I'd found was very fitting for the pre-Halloween season. It was about a haunted table. And she tells a story of a table that she had gotten secondhand that had a very weird energy. And I won't go into the whole thing, but it was a very captivating story. And she then goes into the details of her and a witch friend of hers doing a ritual to banish the spirit from the table. Since becoming more familiar with her channel, I can tell you that this was one of the spookier, creepier, more traditionally witchy videos that she puts out, because as a green witch, she works a lot with herbs and nature, and the rest of her channel is relatively soothing and calming. And for this one to be kind of almost like a campfire story is kind of different. And the way in which she showed the rituals and the spells and the cutaways of the different things that they did was also very different from the tone of her channel normally. And I do highly recommend that you check out her channel, especially if you resonate with the term green witch and you like herbs and plants and you want to know more about their magical properties. But this video was different. It was something that felt slightly out of the craft, or one of the 90s witchy movies that I would have liked as a teen. And I think that that was purposeful. I think I was led to that video for that resonance, for that feeling of like, oh, this is familiar and this is what drew me in originally. So we're going to dive in deeper. And through that video, I discovered another YouTuber who was actually the witch that helped her with the ritual. And her name is Olivia, and she is the Witch of Wanderlust on YouTube. And that was where I really fell down the rabbit hole. Aside from the witchcraft, I really relate and like a lot about Olivia's personal story. She is a fellow ace, an asexual. She's a pole dancer. I was a burlesque dancer. Like, there's a few parallels there, and I just enjoyed her general style. But aside from that, she was the quote-unquote expert at banishing the spirit from the table that Annabelle had called in. And even her aesthetic on her channel is much darker and more traditionally witchy than the Green Witch Annabelle, who has a very soothing, natural vibe. And so I started really diving into all of Olivia's videos, and she has videos on how to do banishment spells, and she has videos on just everything that I wanted to know. I'm not so much an herbs and plants person, although I have gotten more into that since being called towards the craft. So the Green Witch's channel was very soothing and I enjoyed it, but it didn't feel like stuff that I was going to immediately apply to my practice. Whereas Olivia's channel was very much the type of stuff that I was looking to integrate. And it ended up being completely fitting for so many reasons. because you're always guided to the thing that you need at the time you need it, of course. And then particularly when it comes to these magical type practices, you may not be really sure why you're interested in something. And then a couple months later, something will happen in your life and it'll make it all make sense. And boy, did that happen in my life. So, one of the things that occurred after finding Olivia's channel, which is a lot about protection magic, she has a ton of content that's amazing, but a lot of the stuff that I really dove into was about protection. And coinciding with this witchy awakening, I also started becoming a little more active on TikTok because there's an element of TikTok called Witch Talk that has a lot of good witchcraft stuff. And we're going to pause here and give my little energetic read on TikTok. Now, this is neither a pro nor con. It is just an observation of the energy of this app. TikTok's energy is so much more rapid pace than any other social media outlet that I've ever experienced. And you can feel that just watching the videos. Like you get sucked down a rabbit hole. They're nice little bite-sized stuff. It's usually cut together really quickly. But even energetically, it's so much, so fast. And I would get to the end of a day or an evening where I'd been watching a lot of TikTok videos and I would find I felt as if I'd experienced an entire year of interacting with other human beings. And as an empath, that's a lot of weight. I would need to cleanse so hard after a TikTok binge. And again, this is not necessarily supposed to be a con of the app. It's just the nature of the beast. When you're encountering that much content quickly, it's like you literally are interacting with the same number of humans as videos that you've just watched. And so that's a lot of interaction. I would get this like energy hangover if I was on TikTok for too long. And then another thing that started happening around this time period is that I also started feeling as if I was being watched, not in a physical sense, but in an energetic sense. And I don't want to talk too much about this because I've put it past me, but I just got this feeling that there was something connected to the energies that I was encountering on this app and this feeling of being watched and needing to put up bigger protections. So it was very fitting that just prior to this happening, I had found Olivia slash the Witch of Wonderlust channel. Again, she does talk a lot about protection, as does the Green Witch. So I had two really good resources there. And so I started implementing a lot of their practices, one of which I've actually made my own version of and incorporated into my Become Your Own Healer class in the Rainbow Witch Academy. And things calmed down a lot. So there was that element of the universe knew what I needed before I even had the situation come about. And another thing that came about with my Baby Witch Awakening is I kept getting big signs that I was supposed to start working with Hecate in my magical practice. And Hecate is the goddess of witches in Greek mythology. So it made sense that those two were connected, but the signs that were coming up were just like undeniable. There is a Hecate card in the Total Bitty Goddess deck, and it just kept falling out when I was shuffling for things, or it would just pop up randomly somewhere. And then I found a video on Olivia's channel that was about her working with Hecate. And it just got to the point that I couldn't ignore the synchronicities. So I started just very subtly working with her. I don't do really hardcore deity work. I think of all of my guides and angels and goddesses that I work with as sort of like equal ground. And it doesn't resonate for me to work with a goddess or a deity in a way that feels almost like a devout servant. I think that we're all kind of on the same level. So I like to think of my work with a goddess as calling upon a friend that I want to help me with a project. So I began to just start doing a regular mantra practice with Hecate, and she lived on my altar in the form of her Total Bitty Goddess card. And it was just that simple. I didn't do a ton of offerings. Occasionally I would, buy some nice roses and put them on the same shelf where I had the card. And I would just do a mantra every night. Because as I read into Hecate's energy, and also as I gathered a little bit of information from other sources on YouTube and online, she felt very school marmish in like the best way. Like some people think of her energy as kind of darker and scary. And for me, she was just stern. So I got the feeling that if I was going to be working with her, I needed to really dedicate myself to a daily practice, which in this case was just a mantra practice with mala beads. And it seemed really fitting because at that time, I didn't have a lot of routine in my daily life. So the fact that I had to dive into this mantra practice on a nightly basis felt appropriate. But it became even more appropriate about a month later when my cat of 18 and a half years, my little familiar Zoe, passed away. And the fact that I had a spiritual practice of any kind in place on a regular basis was such a lifesaver for that time period of grief. And then on top of that, Hecate is kind of known as being the torchbearer to the spiritual realm. So it was almost as if working with her, she was showing me the way to be able to communicate with my dearly passed on cat. And I did. I had my nightly mantra practice, and I also dedicated a tarot deck specifically to Zoe's energy so that I could have a nightly tarot card reading and communicate with her in some form. And these are all just practices that came about in my life when I went through this transition. They're not right or wrong or recommendations necessarily. I'm just trying to kind of highlight the fact that there are very few coincidences when it comes to the realm of spiritual work and magical work. And sometimes it takes time for things to be revealed to you. And other times you wake up at 3 a.m. and you have an absolute certainty that this is the next right action. And neither one of those things is right or wrong. And you're not doing anything right or wrong if either one of those is what's happening to you. But listen to those little pulls from your soul, whether they be intense and waking you up in the mid-morning or very subtle whispers that you don't quite know where they're going to lead you. Because that's where we find the magic, going with our intuition and letting the path unfold before us in a way that's more magical than we ever could have imagined. I hope you have enjoyed season 2 of Please Don't Eat the Sage. I like to keep it loose as to when upcoming seasons are going to come out. But if you've enjoyed this podcast this season, like it, share it, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, because those are the ways that I know that someone is out there listening. And that's a really great motivation to get back to the microphone for season 3. This episode of Please Don't Eat the Sage was brought to you in part by my Patreon members. So I'd like to thank Ashley, Laura, Caitlin, Amanda, and Karen. If you'd like to join their ranks, you can do so over at patreon.com/Michelle Shea. You can also support this podcast by pre-ordering your own copy of the Total Betty Goddess deck, or head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review.